Good morning. This is Adam Wise of Android Technology at Oxford Instruments Company. And in this short video, I want to give a quick introduction to using the Marana 4BV11 sCMOS camera in Solis. Here I've got the main Solis window open, showing the sCMOS version. You might notice some differences in the interface if you're used to using our CCD cameras. There are far fewer knobs to tweak, but still some configuration options. So acquisition mode and exposure time work the same, but where you might expect to see an ADC readout option to show different speeds for the analog to digital converter, instead here we have 1 pixel readout rate, and instead a sensitivity dynamic range drop-down. So we can either choose the fast frame rate 12-bit mode or the higher dynamic range, slower frame rate 16-bit mode. And just to show you the practical difference between those two modes, here I'm going to try to set this for maximum frame rate, about 48 frames per second. If I take an exposure or take some data, this is looking at the window in my office here, you can see that I'm saturating the ADC at 2 to the 16 counts, 2 to the 12 counts, inclusive of 0. So it goes up to 4095. 0 to 4095 is 2 to the 12. If I switch to the 16-bit mode, now I'm getting fewer frames per second, but if I take an exposure, I'm getting a much higher dynamic range image. And you can see if I set to a longer exposure, now I'm saturating at 65535, which is 1 less than 2 to the 16 counts, again inclusive of 0. I'm going to make a longer video about dynamic range, ADC amplifier gain, and pixel well depth and bit depth shortly, so please stay tuned for that. I'd also like to show you the binning and ROI options, ROI meaning region of interest. So binning is adding multiple pixels together. So 1 by 1 is the default, each individual pixel is just itself. Then here we're going to add 2 by 2 pixels together, 3 by 3 pixels together, and so on. The purpose of this is to get higher counts and higher dynamic range and higher signal to noise within one pixel, within one superpixel, at the cost of some spatial resolution. So if I go 8 by 8, now I'm losing some spatial resolution. You can't really see it very close here. Maybe if I zoom in, you'd be able to see it more if I switch back to 1 by 1. You can see I've got a more pixelated image, which is I'm losing spatial resolution because I'm adding together 64 pixels in that case into one superpixel. However, you might notice that unlike a CCD camera, when I turn on pixel binning, even at a large extent, and I try to go to the maximum frame rate, my maximum frame rate is unchanged. This is because of the sCMOS active pixel technology. I'm doing the addition not on the chip and not saving additional ADC read cycles, but I'm doing it on the head, which is to say in the camera's memory and processor, which, although it speeds up information transfer along the USB connection, it doesn't actually change the number of reads, pixel reads that I'm doing, so it doesn't speed up the frame rate. What does speed up the frame rate, and if I'm going to go back to 1 by 1 here, is reading out fewer rows. So I can sacrifice some area of the chip. So if I were to set this to 1024, half the chip, do a read, or do an image, now I'm getting only half the chip, but I'm getting it at twice the frame rate. And I can extend this all the way down to a single row, where I can get pretty astounding 24 and change thousand frames per second, which would be useful for high-speed spectroscopy applications. Again, I'm only going to get 1 row, which might not be too exciting as an image, but it makes a perfectly fine spectra as long as you can focus down to 11 microns. I mean, I can still get quite a high frame rate, say at 10 rows, still doing 4 kilohertz here. So if I were to take this, I'm getting spectral information. I can switch to a spectral view, and I'm doing it at multiple kilohertz of speed. So if I take a kinetic series with this, which is to say a movie, record this, now I'm getting high-speed information off of a small strip, perfect for high-speed spectroscopy. And you can actually see the individual timestamps if you right-click on this window, go to Preferences, Common, Enable Timestamps. This will show you relative timestamps for each frame. So you can see I'm stepping in jumps of, what is that, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 0.2 milliseconds per frame. And that I think would be about 40 microseconds at the absolute fastest reading out a single row. Also, you might notice when you're playing around with the interface here, trying to get the maximum frame rate, if I reduce the width of my image, I don't actually get an improvement in frames per second. So if I go to 1024, then I go to frame rate here, still the same number of frames per second. And that's because I have to read out, due to the structure of the chip, the structure of the sCMOS chip, the whole row. I can't skip those read cycles for the rest of the row. So I'm getting one row for free, and I don't get a discount with a smaller sub row. So regardless of the width, you're getting the same frame rate. So that's just a really quick introduction to the sCMOS version of Solis using the Marana 4BV11. It'd be quite similar using a Sona or a Marana 6.5. So if you've got any questions, feel free to contact me at a.wise@andor.com or visit the Andor website, and otherwise have a good rest of your day.